Good morning. Today our group Lena Hachim Rala and I, Ria Sharma from 7th A, are going to talk about the Punnett square. Heredity is when the parents pass down their genes to the offspring. Each parent has two alleles for a particular gene. An offspring receives one allele from each parent, so the offspring has genes from both parents. When Gregor Mendel studied pea plants, he noticed that traits are inherited in patterns. One tool for understanding the patterns of a heredity is a diagram called the Punnett square, which is a graphic used to predict the possible genotype of an offspring in a given cross.
Good morning. I'm Lena from 7A, and today I will be presenting the Punnett square. We will be showing how you can calculate the possibilities of an offspring by using a Punnett square. A Punnett square shows all the possible allele combinations in the offspring. An allele is one of two or more versions of a gene. An individual inherits two alleles for each gene, one from each parent. An organism can be homozygous dominant if it carries two copies of the same dominant allele, or homozygous recessive if it carries two copies of the same recessive allele. Heterozygous means that an organism has two different alleles of the gene. In our Punnett square, we will be calculating how the offspring turtle shell will be, and for that, we need to cross the alleles. In this case, dominant B is represented as black turtle shell pattern, and recessive B will be represented as brown turtle shell pattern. So, let's begin crossing the alleles. Dominant B with a dominant B will be homozygous dominant. A dominant B with a dominant B will be two homozygous dominant. A big B with a recessive B will be heterozygous. A big B with a recessive B will be heterozygous. Let's take something important to take into account. In the heterozygous, you need to take into account the dominant allele. So in this case will be black turtle shell pattern because the B is represented as black turtle shell. And the male is homozygous dominant and the female is heterozygous. So the turtle offspring will be 50% homozygous dominant and 50% heterozygous. And the phenotype, the turtle will have black turtle shell pattern because in heterozygous we take into account the dominant allele, that is black turtle shell pattern. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Nururada and I'm going to show you the result of our Punnett square. If you take a look at our Punnett square, you can see the different possibilities of how the turtle shell will outcome. As you see, there are two possibilities, black shell and brown shell. Big B represents black shell and little b represents brown shell. At the end, it's a 50% homozygous dominant and 50% heterozygous. But the dominant letter is taken into account and will become 100% black shell. Note, genotypes are different combinations of alleles. For example, big B, big B, and little b. Phenotypes are the different characteristics that are actually observed in a particular individual.
In conclusion, genes will be important not only to understand the cause of a disease, but also recognizing the manner in which someone responds to particular therapies. For example, you can inherit heart diseases, Down syndrome, diabetes, and even cancer. Punnett squares can help you know if you inherited any diseases from your parents. For example, if you inherited a heart disease, you can try to prevent a heart attack or any other problem that you may have in the future. Punnett squares can help you know the physical traits of an organism before it's born. But apart from knowing diseases, Punnett squares can also help you know from where you come from. For example, if you take a DNA test because you want to know who your parents are, specialists can identify your genes and then make a Punnett square to see if the results are accurate. But you can see further results by knowing the genotype and the phenotype. The phenotype helps you by giving a characteristic to an individual, and genotypes give a letter that represents a combination of an allele. Both of these help us see more results when solving a Punnett square. For example, in the example about sea turtles that Lena mentioned, the phenotype of the final result is a black shell pattern, and the genotype is heterozygous. That means big B and little b. Thank you.